We'll just start in 2 minutes. Okay?
I think, sir, you can start.
Okay, all right. So thank you very much. Okay, very warm good afternoon to all of you. This is the course is Canada, Society and Politics. Uh, the title of the code number is MPSE 009. MPSE 009. This is a part of the master's program in Migration and Diaspora Studies, MIMD. Today is the third class, the first class on 30th March. We covered 3 units basically. Unit 1, Settler Society and Staples Economy. Unit 2, the Constitution, BNA Act, British North America Act of 1867, and the Constitutional Act of 1982, and the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. In third unit, we covered the parliamentary federal institutions in Canada, the executive branches, legislature, and also the judiciary. In the last class on 6th April, we took care of the other 3 units. Unit 4, Federalism, Intergovernmental Relations, Fiscal Federalism. Unit 5, Public Administration, how it operates in Canada. And Unit 6, Political Parties, Pressure Groups, and Policy Communities in Canada. So before I start today's class, which will be Unit 7, 8, and 9, basically today's class will take care of the social movements, how it has taken shape, different forms of social movement, different variations of social movements, why they were formed, what was the backgrounds, what was the ideology, what was the motives, what is the success rate, what is the failure, the upside, the downside, strength, limitations, everything. And NGOs, the environmental group, anti-globalization, when the globalization was ushered in the post-1990s at the end of Cold War, it did create a lot of ripple effect, lot of turbulence in many societies, and Canada was no exception. So there was also impact on Canada, some good and some bad, some positive and some negative, and we will discuss both. Unit 8, Aboriginal groups, the distinctive Aboriginal groups, mostly the people who live in the Northwest Territories, in the Yukon Territory, in the Nunavut Territories, etc., toward the Northeast areas. And finally, Unit 9, the civil society, the policy development, and the service delivery. So far, I think we have basically covered all the basic features, the basic aspect of Canada. I think you are very much aware by this time, the geography, the historical evolution, the nature of society, the economy, etc., etc. It's a huge country, as I've said. This is the second largest country in the world in terms of area or territory. The first one will be Russia. This will be the largest country in Western Hemisphere in terms of, again, area. I remember when I went to USA, I thought this is the largest area because if you fly from, let us say, Detroit to San Francisco, it took 6 hours. And Detroit to London is also kind of 6 hours. But when you look at Canada, if you, let us say, fly from Nova Scotia or Toronto to Vancouver, it also literally takes 6 hours. It's a huge country. And maybe most of the parts are inhabited, uninhabited, not too many populations, but area-wise, it's a huge area. But I think the two key provinces in Canada are basically Ontario and Quebec. And lately, states like British Columbia, provinces like British Columbia, Alberta, etc., and to some extent, Manitoba and Saskatchewan, they're also catching up in various ways, in various forms. The settler colonies, basically, I think it's very easy to understand, comparable to India or many other countries. There are two nationalities which dominated the history of Canada for a long, long time, for centuries, mostly the French and particularly the British. So it used to be English colonies. Remember when the British colonial rule was there over India and Indian subcontinent, uh, there was a prime minister called Winston Churchill. You must have heard his name. And he used to brag, in fact, he used to tell, the sun never sets in British Empire. Uh, then you must be thinking, I mean, why he said so? The reason being, the sun rises in Canada or US, and because of the time difference, 12 hours, 14 hours, whatever. Okay, the sun sets here. So wherever the sun rises, it belongs to UK, to Great Britain, and wherever the sun sets, whether it is India or Myanmar or Singapore, again it belongs to Great Britain. And they used to also a lot of do kind of cross trading kind of things. So taking one particular staples or agricultural commodities, you must have heard about Boston Tea Parties. The teas were taken from here, from India or the Indian subcontinent per se, and taken there. Okay, and those stuff or the produce over there, which is in surplus, it used to come here. So they used to milk profits on both ends of the aisle. It is basically currently it's a multicultural place. I have said that before. It used to be bicultural, mostly French and British or English culture. But lately there has been this big inflow, particularly at the end of World War II, after 1945, 50s, 60s, 70s, the flow of immigrants continued. And today, if you go to the major cities in Canada, whether you go to Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal, Edmonton, Calgary, Vancouver, wherever, you see lots of immigrants over there. For example, if you go to British Columbia, to Vancouver, you will find literally every second, third person is a person from the Punjab origin, from Sikh community. And number of those people, they've been highly successful in the political arena, contesting for the electoral politics of Canada. They have been very successful. And in any cabinet in the last 20, 30 years, if you check closely, there has been members of the Indo-Canadian immigrant community who have made marks in Canadian Parliament and also in the Canadian cabinet. They have hold some very, very important positions even in the current cabinet. There are also members from the Indo-Canadian communities, and that diaspora has been highly successful. But also lately, you must have heard that has also been a little bit controversial as well because of certain policy differences between India and Canada. So Canada basically has a long history, more than 1,000 years of age, settler colonies. And the Aboriginal tribes is one of the oldest tribes in Canada, and they have their own uniqueness, their own distinctiveness, their own cultures, their own customs and rituals. For a long time, they used to fight with the federal governments, and I think they've been able successfully in mobilizing their strength and also in getting a lot of the rights being allocated specially to them. There are 7 regions: Pacific Coast, Cordillera, the Prairies, Canadian Shield, the Great Lakes, St. Lawrence Lowlands, the Atlantic provinces, Appalachian region, and the Arctic. Not too many people live in Arctic, but it is definitely a part of that. Okay, there are 10 provinces. Okay, that's why each of the Canadian provinces are very, very large. Like for example, in India, we have got what, 29 provinces. But if you look at Uttar Pradesh, UP, it's a huge one. Okay, but you look at Himachal Pradesh, for example, you look at Kerala, for example, you look at Mizoram, they are not that big in terms of the size or in terms of the territory. The 10 provinces: Newfoundland, Labrador, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Islands, Quebec, Ontario, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and British Columbia, all the way from the east to the west. Okay, the 3 territories which are almost like the way we said it in India, like Union Territory, like Pondicherry, like Chandigarh. Okay, Northwest Territories, Yukon, and Nunavut. And this is the place what I was talking about. Most of the Aboriginal tribes, the primitive tribes, like the native Indians, okay, they used to live in North America. They live in this particular place. Okay. Overall, if you look at the totality, in a cumulative sense, they're only 3%, but they are very significantly big number in those Northwest territories. Most people are Christians in Canada in terms of the populations. 70, there is a lot of industrial output that Canada does. That's why you saw very recently when Donald Trump, the president of the United States, tried to impose tariffs on Canadian products. Canada also retaliated by imposing its own tariffs. So it's instead of a win-win situation, it's almost like a lose-lose situation. Okay, let us see how this tug of war or this tariff tough battle continues and how long. And again, as I've said, told you in the last class, Canada is going to have a federal election in 2 weeks' time, I think on the 28th of April, so which is just another maybe 2 weeks. We'll see as to which party comes to power, and again, who is going to be the prime minister, and what kind of policy this person is going to make toward USA and also toward the rest of the world, okay, including India, because the relation, as you know, since last year, it has gone down little bit downhill. It has become little bit frosty because of the number of factors. So now let us see how the new government is going to take the relationship, whether it is taking it forward or backward or what. Canada has also, just like any other sovereign country, as a major country, Canada is considered to be a very important middle power. Middle power in the sense, you know, in the power equation in the world, we usually talk about, when you talk about great power, for example, we try to divide and demarcate into 3 categories roughly. One is major power, one is middle power, and one is small power. Major powers are those powers we say in terms of the hard power and soft power, in terms of the economy, in terms of um, defense, like military, and in terms of the overall overarching influence in the global affairs, in the global issues, etc., etc. Okay. The middle powers are those powers where we say they are significant powers, they are power to reckon with, but they may not have that much of clout in defense terms or in military terms or in economic terms, but they are nevertheless very, very powerful, and they can also sway a lot of the swing states as well. Small powers, they are relatively weak in the military, weak in economy, maybe in terms of their leeways or flexibilities or leverage, etc. But again, I think it will be wrong and premature to say that the major powers are going to continue as major powers forever. I mean, look at the power equation or structure at the end of World War II. In 1945, when World War II ended, basically it was USA and USSR. Those are the two major powers, and the Cold War started, as you all know. And we also had significant powers in European sectors like Great Britain, France, etc. Then China was there. Okay, initially China, the communist China was not a member. It was Kuomintang China or Nationalist China, or later on renamed as Taiwan. Became. But later on in the 70s, the mainland China, the communist China, Communist Party of China, that became the member. So basically, there are 5 big powers: USA, USSR, Great Britain, France, and China. That continued for 45, 50 years. Okay. Then Soviet Union got dismembered. It got disintegrated at the end of World War, at the end of Cold War in 1989, 1990. Then became Russia. Okay, so those things we consider to be major powers. Okay? But today, when we talk about major powers, okay, we also look at India, we look at Brazil, we look at Argentina, we look at Japan, we look at Germany, and many other countries. Okay, because this power in the last 50, 60, 70 years, they've grown exponentially, and also they've grown dramatically in various ways. And you know that, for example, India, I mean, why we call that? In IT, we are a superpower. In terms of manpower, in terms of even hard power, soft power, in terms of all the indigenous strength that we have, I think we legitimately can claim to be one of the major powers in the world, where we try to be on our own, we're standing on our own feet. So India of 2025 is not the India of 1947. We have come a long way in many different directions, and also in very positive ways. Okay, the middle powers, You can take this example of this Canada, for example. You can take the example of again Nigeria, Ethiopia, or you can take Singapore, South Korea, etc., etc. Saudi Arabia, for example. Okay, small powers. You can say examples like Vietnam, like Qatar, etc., etc. Okay, but again, it will be wrong and a misnomer to say a small is going to remain a small forever. Small can be middle, middle can be major, and it can be vice versa. Major can also be middle. Okay, so depending on a situation, because there has been constant geopolitical shift, geo-economic shift, geostrategic shift, and how you navigate all those competing current, competing forces, that is very, very crucial in retaining or maintaining your turf. Okay, whether you are a major or a middle or a small one. In terms of the Canada's external relations, Canada and EU, they have got good relations with all the European countries in general and also EU as a particular member. I was reading an article the other day that Canada is very much interested to be a part of EU, although it is not in European continent per se, but they would like very much to be a part of that. Okay? Canada and US, of course, is the largest trade partners. Okay, they both United States and Canada, they share a lot of boundaries. Okay, common boundaries. Canada is an important part of NATO. It's part of G7. Is a part of G20. 2 years ago, when Justin Trudeau was the prime minister, he visited India as part of the G20 summit that took place in Delhi here. Canada, China. China has a big trade, investment, supply chain component with Canada. Canada and ASEAN. Canada in the last 20 years, they have made forays into different countries within ASEAN, particularly in Southeast Asia and Northeast Asia and East Asia. That includes all those countries like Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Brunei, Philippines, you name it. I mean, all those countries, Vietnam, etc., etc. Canada, India, I just talked about it. Okay, so we have got a huge relationship. Of course, it is not pretty good at the present time, but hopefully things will go up. And again, talking about diaspora, there is a significant Indian diasporic population in different Canadian cities. We also have some important Canadian companies that are also operating in India as well. You know, there is a big tea coffee joint here in the airport and in many places called Tim Hortons. That is a part of the Canadian outreach, okay, in terms of soft power. McCann, the frozen food company, that is also Canadian. So I can give you many, many examples. So you may be also aware of that. Okay? So that's what we covered in Unit 1. Unit 2, we talk about particularly the acts of 1867. I think that's the act that paved the way for Canada first becoming a Dominion Republic, then gaining independence and different rights little by little, bit by bit, all the way till 1982. Okay, but by that time, I think Canada was basically de facto an independent country. It was a liberal democracy. It is a liberal democracy. They have a limited and responsible government. They believe in rule of law, and they have multi-party systems. So Canadian Constitution Act of 1807, it made Canada a federal state. So federation is there. The capital is there in Ottawa. They control a lot of things. At the same time, all the 10 different provinces plus the 3 territories, they also enjoy certain amount of basic rights, which is guaranteed under the Canadian Constitution. Okay. Canada ceased to be a British colony with the passage of Statute of Westminster in 1931. Canada was very much a part of the Allied war efforts in World War II. Canada does provide a parliamentary, which is a bicameral, just like in India, we have a lower house and an upper house. The lower house people are directly elected. In Canada also, it is basically the same. The lower house is called House of Commons. The upper house is called the the upper house is called the Senate. When we say liberal democracy, I mean, what are the different elements? If somebody asks you, okay, why you say Canada is a liberal democracy? Give me some examples, some basic features, some salient aspects. basically supremacy of the constitution. The constitution reigns supreme, and it is based on different codified laws, different statutes, etc. And that is already mentioned in Canada. The multi-party systems, the parties, the Conservative Party, the Liberal Party, Parti Quebec, the New Democratic Parties, number of other minor parties, okay, that is also very much a part of the liberal democracy. Universal franchise, anybody who is above the age of 18, he or she has the right to vote, has the right to exercise their franchise. The fundamental freedom, freedom of movement, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, the kind of things you see in any particular democracy, whether it is India or Singapore or US or Australia, you just pick any examples. I think that is there as part of the liberal democracy. Independence of judiciary, judiciary remains the supreme. The federal Supreme Court is in Ottawa, that is the number one, the top apex court, but also in the different provinces, they have also the highest court systems. The only difference between India and Canada is, okay, and maybe Canada has got more similarities with Great Britain. Like in Great Britain, you have got a parliament, which is the lower house is House of Commons, and the upper house is House of Lords. Okay, and the House of Commons is kind of directly elected by the people. Whoever becomes the majority party, Labour Party, Conservative Party, they become the Prime Minister. Okay, like currently the Keith Starmer is the Prime Minister. Before that, it was Rishi Sunak. Okay, then before that, Boris Johnson. So we can go on. And the head of state in UK, in England, is the Queen of England. It used to be Prince Elizabeth. And after her passing away, her son, the King Charles, now he is the head of the state. He is the monarch. Okay? In Canada, they follow the British model. Technically and theoretically, and de jure, the King of England is also the the head of state in Canada as well. But he does not exercise the direct power. So he delegates his power, even if it is very nominal one, to a person who is designated as Governor General. And that Governor General acts like a proxy, like a nominee, like a representative of the British monarch, but acting, operating, staying in Ottawa, in the capital of Canada, the federal capital of Canada. So that's the difference. But in India, for example, we follow the more democratic process, like Singapore, like you can say like Australia. Okay, our head of state, the president. Okay, it is not a dynastic or a hereditary kind of things. Okay, there is no queen or queen there. Okay, it is elected every 5 years. Currently, we have Draupadi Murmu, the lady who is the president of India, and she is the head of state. And Sri Narendra Modi, he is the head of government, because he is elected directly by the people, particularly from the majority party BJP, that is the largest party, or the combination of NDA, National Democratic Alliance. Okay, based on that, he becomes the head of government, and the president is elected by the lower house, by the upper house, and also by the assembly members from the different states of the union. Okay, and every 5 years we have a president. Currently, we have Draupadi Murmu. Before that, we had Ramnath Kovind. Before that, we had Pranab Mukherjee, okay, so on and so forth. And this has been going on since 1952, when India became a republic. One of the criteria of the republic means your head of state must be an elected one, not through hereditary means, not through a dynastic ways. Okay, so that's the big difference between the head of state in Canada and the head of state in India. So please be reminded of that one. Okay. In Unit 3, we talk about federal institutions, the bicameral legislatures, mostly the power, the functions, the objectives, mostly based on 1867 Act and also 1982 Act. In the upper house, in the Senate, we have 105 members. In the lower house, 338 members. So altogether, 105 plus 338, it is 443 members. Okay. And they decide all the bills, the readings, the second stage, third stage. Okay. So they do that. Okay. And currently the Prime Minister is Mark Carney, and he's from the Liberal Party. After Justin Trudeau, he resigned. So that's why we have going to be a new election which has been called, and we'll see, I mean, in 2 weeks' time, who is going to win and who is going to lose and why. What are the factors for that one? Okay. In terms of the federal things that we talked about in Unit 4, mostly, I think, quickly, there are certain, just like in India, we have got a union list. It means these are the things the center in Delhi, they can do that, okay, all over the country. Then there is a state list, and then there is a concurrent list. Concurrent means both of them, center and the state. In Canada, that is a provincial government. They have got exclusive solo monopoly over that under Section 92, natural resources, administration of justice, prison, municipalities, hospitals, management, sale of public lands, etc., etc. So these are the exclusive domain of the federal government, and that has been guaranteed under the Constitution of Canada under Section 92. Then we have, yes, in terms of these are the provincial powers. The federal powers are under Section 91, and mostly they are the hard powers, you can say, okay, or the high politics per se, foreign affairs, defense, trade, commerce, transport, communication, banking, currency. So let us say, for example, if the like in India, we had a couple of years ago, we had this demonetization. Suddenly, the 2,000 notes and 500 notes were invalid. Okay, a state government cannot do that. Okay, it's the federal government, the central government, they can do that. In Canada, it's the same thing. If the value of the currency is going up or down, it's going to be demonetized. Only the federal government has the power, the authority to do that. So the foreign affairs, so just like example, India, okay? India and Canada, they decided to withdraw the diplomats and the ambassadors. Currently, we don't have any Canadian High Commissioner in Delhi, and vice versa. So maybe after the election, maybe there can be a resumption of the diplomatic activities. Okay, so now it is acting in a very skeleton, very minimal manner. Okay, defense. Okay, if Canada would like to take part in any war efforts, okay, or as part of the NATO efforts, because under Article 5 of North Atlantic Alliance in NATO, if a particular country attacks NATO, either outside of NATO, then it will be considered as an attack on all of NATO. So all the NATO members under the Article 5, they have to join forces. Okay, so that is again an exclusive domain of the federal government. So foreign affairs, defense, trade, commerce, whether it should go up or more, import, export, all kinds of things. Tariff duties, okay, like as I said, when Trump decided to impose 25% tariff on Canadian products, okay, coming to US, okay, again Canada retaliated. Okay, those are the things, those are the areas in which the federal government can take important decisions. The provincial governments, I told you, resources, justice, prisons, etc., etc. The concurrent powers, which are shared by both the federal government and the state government, that is mostly agriculture, immigration, etc. On issues like pension, it is also a concurrent power. But if there is a conflict or a tussle or a tug of war, the provincial government, they prevail on that particular one. In terms of the different waves of federalism, okay, we see different waves. For example, between 1867 to 89, 1887, 20, 30 years, quasi-federalism. Federalism is there, but not exactly. It is like a 50-50, like a partial federalism, okay? Then 1896 to end, beginning of World War I, 1914, again, power was more geared towards the provinces. Then we have an emergency federalism. Again, the center became more powerful during the World War I, basically 1914 to 19. Then the provincial power, again, they got the power, again back to emergency federalism during the Great Depression of 1929, and again the onset of World War II. Okay, and since the end of the war in 1945, end of World War II, we have got more cooperative kind of things. Basically, both the federal government and the state government, they decided to work in tango, they decided to work in cohort with one another. Okay, there are differences, there are divergences, but at the end of the day, both the sides, they would like to force some commonalities. Okay, Unit 5, we discussed about public administration, Mostly, I think if you follow the Indian model or the most of the modern societies, I think they follow that. They believe in merit. They believe in meritocracy. They believe in hierarchy system. Going back to Max Weber or the Weberian model of democracy, you start at the bottom up, then you slightly move up. Okay, like a person, assistant secretary, they become deputy secretary, associate secretary, secretaries like that in a governmental institution. The same thing is applied over there. Mostly it is based on merit, but there are uh, also specific provisions for Aboriginal people, for disabled people. But other than that, mostly it is based on merit. So if you look at the public administration in the last 10 or 20 years, there has been an part of the new public management, e-governance, digital governance, and most of the modern countries, including our country, India, they are following that one. So that's why you see more openness, more transparency in terms the government operates. So there is much more closer affinities or much more closer interactions between both the sides. Okay, and also we see the society, Canadian society has become a little bit more personality oriented, more leadership oriented. I mean, how many people remember the prime minister of many other countries? But in Canada, we know Brian Mulroney, Lister Pearson, Justin Trudeau, his father, who was the prime minister in 1970s, uh, Pierre Trudeau. Okay, I think because those people they framed certain policies, they brought about a lot of changes and reforms. Some of the things worked, some of the things did not work. But nevertheless, they tried to bring about a paradigm shift in terms of the administration. So you see an ushering of multi-party systems, ideologically pragmatism, um, also the trying to balance the different multi-ethnic groups, etc., etc. I think in all of that, they were very much successful. In terms of the Unit 6 political parties, I told you it's a multi-party system. Mostly, it is the Liberal Party, which is currently in power. The Conservative Party, they also used to be power. The Bloc Quebec, mostly that is a Quebec-based party, and they believe in Quebec nationalism. There is a time when they wanted independence for Quebec. There was a big referendum, and they narrowly lost. So they do get some special privileges, but still Quebec is a part of Canada. But again, in Quebec province, mostly a lot of the languages are used in French. Officially, Canada has got bilingual policy, English as well as French. Okay. Uh, in terms of today's lecture, I think the social movements, I think that's very, very important. That I think we need to discuss today. Just give me 1 minute. Yes. When we talk about social movements, social movements go with a lot of those important theme-based areas, okay, issue-based areas. Agriculture is one, atmosphere is another, climate change, biodiversity, energy, forest, fresh water, waste and hazardous materials. I think most of these things are very familiar. This is self-explanatory. It applies to literally every democratic society, even whether it is in Latin America or Africa or India or Southeast Asia. But in Canada, it is done in a much more organized way, and a lot of the social movements, the NGOs, sometimes they work in a solo fashion, sometimes they work in collaboration, in cohort with one another. There has been successes, there has also been challenges. Okay. At the same time, there has been movement towards globalization and also anti-globalization. So there are people who are both for and against. Okay, depending on which way you are looking at it. Okay, and also lately in the last 10, 20 years, maybe it is an after effect or a ripple effect from the feminist revolution in the north of Canada, namely the United States of America. There is a women's movement, feminist movement that is also taking place. Okay, and which we'll discuss in this class. Okay, so when we talk about social movements, I think there are three basic elements if you need to mobilize a particular social movements. First of all, You need an ideology on which potential member can be united. So, for example, like in India, we had called this Narmada Bachao Andolan, okay, Narmada rivers, okay, the water conservation, etc. So, Chipko movement of Sundarlal Bahuguna, okay, like felling of the trees, okay. Why we need to preserve the greenery? Why we need to preserve the trees, okay? That has to be a compelling reason, okay, because it is good for habitat, it is good for the climate. Otherwise, it will be a dry, humid areas, okay, and we can feel global warming and climate change in its ulterior forms. Okay. The second area that is needed to create a social movement is you need to have a able leadership and a doable leadership and a proactive leadership. It's not like a one-day thing. It's almost like a 24/7 leadership who is willing to put all his time, all his effort, and all his energy into it. And he must believe in that one. And I think that's very, very important. You also need to have a channel for communication and a network of cooperative relationship. Okay, you need to communicate. I mean, and again here I think media is very important. 50 years ago, 40 years ago, we used to have only printed media. Okay, we did not have any electronic medias. When I went to JNU, Jawaharlal Nehru Universities in early 80s, that was the time when the TV came in black and white, not then colored. Okay, so the electronic media came in the 80s, then followed in the last 20, 25 years, we have got the social media, which is very, very pervasive in many different ways, whether it is Instagram or Facebook or Twitter, now taken over by Elon Musk of X, okay? So different ways of media, okay? Print media, electronic media. Again, when we say print media, electronic media, in English medium, in vernacular mediums, okay? In different languages, okay, of different parts. Like, for example, Al Jazeera. Al Jazeera is a very big media house in Qatar. They have got Al Jazeera English, Al Jazeera Arabic, and different languages. Voice of America, BBC, British Broadcasting Corporation. When I was a child, when I was in school, my father used to always force me to listen to the news every day in the morning, BBC London. Okay, and try to write down 3 or 4 or 5 points. What did I understand or what I did not understand? So I used to listen. Then after, when I grew up, became an adult, I became an addict of BBC without listening to BBC. And later on, when I went to US, I became an addict of CNN, cable news network, where that was very popular. Okay. Apart from ABC News, NBC News, CBS News, PBS News, in India, for example, you see NDTV, GTV, News 18, News 9, all kinds of things. Okay. So again, it is done in English, in Hindi, in different vernacular languages. Okay. Same thing over there in Canada as well. In terms of the environmental movements, they talk about biodiversity, climate change, and desertifications, because environment is a very, very big issue. And there are agencies within Canada, both at the federal level as well as at the central levels. They discuss about the importance of keeping the environment. Like, for example, we talk about it is good and important to maintain clean and green technologies. Okay. And there are NGOs like Greenpeace movement, Earth Root movements, okay, NGOs like Earth Safe Canada, Environmental Defense Canada, Festive Earth Societies, Greenpeace Canada, Go for Green, Sierra Club. You must have heard about it. Okay, I just gave you some high-profile NGO names who have been working. They get some funds, but they also generate some funds through the members. Okay, and the whole idea is to have a clean and green environment, which is good for the habitat, good for the communities. I've been to Canada many times and I've seen firsthand how much the volunteers put their time, put their effort, even on the weekends, on Saturdays, on Sundays, in the evenings, okay, and try to do that. This is basically a voluntary group and they have taken it as a serious passion. Okay, they would like to do this kind of things. And they do get a lot of support. Of course, you can say that they also get some tax break, but beside the point, they have got seriousness and they pay serious attention to this one. Agriculture is again another areas in which the social movement and NGOs are very, very active. They would like to have a more sustainable agriculture instead of just seasonal one. Okay, And sustainability will provide a food sufficiency. And just like in India, we had in the 70s onwards, we had green revolution, and topped up that one, we had white revolution and also blue revolution. White means the dairy revolution in terms of milk and dairies, and in green revolution, blue revolution in terms of harnessing all the rich resources in the underwater, in Arabian Sea, in Bay of Bengal, in Indian Oceans, the marine resources. Okay, so Canada also takes care of a lot of those things in different particular ways in all 10 provinces and all in 3 territories. Permanent cover programs in different places. Um, there has been at least more than 20 high-profile NGOs. They work in different aspects of agriculture, both at the federal government and in the state government. Atmosphere, ozone layer, trying to create a more clean air, natural resources, um, transport like CNG, for example. When I went to Canada first time in 1983, CNG was already there. Okay, I know in Canada, for example, there was a particular I forgot the name, a very important NGO. There was a group who wanted Canada to go nuclear. Okay, but there is again another powerful group that decided Canada not to go nuclear, not to have nuclear weapons or arsenals. The reason being, the rationale being, if you go nuclear, okay, that is going to create a lot of havoc in the atmosphere, and that has been there in France also. You must have heard that um, they there is a group, this Greenpeace movement, they are very much vehemently against this nuclear testing, nuclear things, and that's why they said if it has to be there, it has to be far, far away from the populated areas, etc., so that there is no after effect of these things. Remember, I worked for many, many years in Japan, and the place I was working was very close to Nagasaki. I remember a lot of my students used to tell me that their grandparents uh, they suffered. Some of them died during World War II when the bombing took place in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I've been to Nagasaki, I've been to Hiroshima, and I know firsthand. Uh, I mean, how many millions of people died. But the worst part is how many more millions of people died subsequent to the failing of atom bombs that took place on 3 infamous days, 6th of August 1945 and 9th of August 1945. So in the 50s, even in the 60s, a lot of people died because of the poisonous atmosphere that was still there, and all the water over there in the coastline of Nagasaki and Hiroshima. So many, many millions. So just don't think that a nuclear bomb falls on a particular city on a particular day at a particular time. Only people die at that particular. It lingers for a long time. Okay, that's why there is a term called nuclear winter. It continues for a long time. It completely poisons the entire atmosphere for a long, long time. And the generational thing, second generation, third, fourth generation, they do suffer for that one. So Canadian population is totally against Canada going anything nuclear. They tried. I mean, if you go cross over from US to Canada, I mean, you can see how clean the air is, and pollution is taken very seriously. Acid rain, for example, all the toxic substances that are sprayed over the agricultural fields, that is also being taken care of, so that at least there is no pollution levels. The pollutants, because the pollutants, it reduce air quality and the ground level ozone. So they are very particular about the climate change, and they take very important things. On climate change also, I think that goes along with this atmosphere thing. The Kyoto Protocol, Canada was a very important part of that, of course. Then later on the Paris Peace Accord, the Copenhagen Accord, etc. I think Canada has been at the forefront, try to reduce the emission levels and try to be in same pace with the rest of the country, rest of the world. The world's leading expertise in energy efficient and commercial buildings, efficient industrial processes and equipments, agricultural and forestry practices. Biodiversity, Canada also is at the front stage on biodiversity, which I think is very, very important. For example, Canada has also some very rare sea-based resources in terms of North Atlantic right whale, sea turtle, sea whale, black-footed ferret. So there are some very distinctive endangered species that Canada would like to maintain and like to keep. So I think they take this biodiversity in very serious ways, and they try to retain that. They have also allocated funds meant for that one. Energy resources, federal, provincial, territorial governments, they pay attention to that. There is a very stringent Canadian Environmental Assessment Act that takes part in this energy resources, energy things. Canada does have a lot of resources, but they also import some of them. But they would like to become very, very sufficient so that they don't have to depend on what the different countries do as part of their geopolitics, like the the OPEC countries, okay, Organization for Petroleum Exporting Countries, okay. So I think that is also the energy things are also very, very important. The forest they like to maintain, the forest related resources they have huge forest areas. The moment you drive 10, 20, 50 miles in any major cities, you can see a lot of forests. They try to retain that because they know that it is very important to maintain forest health, climate change, forest diversity, forest ecosystem, forest practices, landscape management, pest management, free biotechnologies, genetics. So they do research on that one, research and development. So I think forest resources that is taken as a very high priority. Fresh water, Canada is very lucky and very privileged to have lot of natural lakes. I think if you go to, for example, to Ontario or to Quebec, you see St. Lawrence River, you see Lake Ontario's, okay, and they try to maintain the fresh water which is supplied over there. So, okay, they also supply some of them to the other side, to the United States. Uh, Canadian Water and Waste Association, they take important cares on that one, how to manage that, how to create a proper ecosystems, and they spend money on that. On waste and hazardous materials, they have a packaging protocols and they take care of that. Um, I think in India, we are slowly and surely we're trying to inch towards that, but I think we're still long way what Canada has so far done. So I think you cannot just throw stuff over here and there. I'm talking about 40, 50 years ago. The rules are very stringent. Like in Japan, whichever things you put in whichever bag or whichever color in a whichever place and a, which particular day of the week and at what time. So it is very much there. In terms of the anti-globalization, so lot of the people, lot of NGOs, they felt very strongly about globalization because they felt this is going to take away their sovereignty, their autonomy. So, and maybe it is going to affect very severely and adversely all the indigenous products, etc. But there is also an other side of the story. There are people who are the proponents of globalization. They wanted that globalization, given a choice between globalization and anti-globalization, maybe globalization is a better thing because you have become a part of the whole global family, and you try to tap into the resources, also the benefits that globalization offers. But there is also a significant amount of people, NGOs, associations, they think that globalization created more harm than good. So in Canada, they have got competing elements on both sides of the aisle. Some intellectual works were also done, like Naomi Klein's No Logo, Bandana Thiba, Biopiracy, Amartya Sen's, etc. I think, again, that's a very contestable area, okay? And we need to, the point that I'm trying to make is, in Canada, just like any other democratic societies, they are like, Amartya Sen once said, this argumentative Indian. So you can say like argumentative Canadian. So you meet two Canadians, maybe they can come up with different viewpoints, different perspectives, and maybe both of them right, maybe both of them wrong, maybe both of them partly right or partly wrong. But nevertheless, they express their views in a clear, candid, and in a very succinct manner. Okay. So in Canada, I think they take all views into considerations uh, and trying to make sure that at least people understand all the different angles and trying to take the best decisions forward, whether it is on agriculture, whether it is environment, greenhouse emissions, endangered species, biodiversity, land degradation, fishery resources, etc., etc. And I think most of the things are done in a very much congenial, in a much more cooperative kind of things. Okay? So I think that's all we have got in chapter 7. In chapter 8, basically they talk about aboriginal things. I think aboriginal, when we talk about, please remember, out of the 10 provinces you hardly see any. For example, tomorrow you fly to Toronto or Montreal, or you fly to Vancouver. I don't think you will see an Aboriginal tribes, okay? But you go to those territories, okay, which are very far away and hardly any people are living there, so very, very less populated in Yukon territories, in Nunavut territories, in Northwestern territories. I think you will see some Aboriginal tribes, just like the native Indians. Okay, if you today you go to America and you look for the Cherokees, the Choctaws, okay, the Senecas, I mean, you have to find. I remember I taught a course on Native American Indian, and it took me a while to read all the books and articles. And I remember I contacted one of the leaders of the American Indian group to take me to their place where they stay. And there, I think we saw some of these Aboriginal tribes and how they take care of that. Okay, Canadian Confederation of Aboriginals, new initiatives. I think when you talk about Aboriginal tribes, there are about 4 categories of Aboriginal tribes. Okay, in the indigenous tribes, the status Indian, the people who are already registered under the Indian Act of Canada of 1985. They live in reserves and they call themselves the First Nation. Okay, reserve means the area where they basically stay in those areas, whether it is Yukon territories and other places. Okay, so that is where they called the status Indians. They are already registered. That means they get certain federal benefit which is guaranteed to those Aboriginal tribes. There is another category called non-status Indians, those who have never had or have lost status under the Indian Act. Uh, they live off reserves. They don't live necessarily in that particular ghetto, that particular reserves. They have migrated to cities. Okay, so you find them in single digit or double digits. Okay, they do get, but they don't stay in that particular area where most of the other uh, Aboriginal tribes they live. Then there is Métis, METIS. They are people of the mixed Indian and non-Indian ancestry, the people who have intermarriage or different relationships. Okay, they are represented by a council called Métis National Councils. Okay, like for example, in India we have called something you must have known called Anglo-Indians. Like when the Britishers came to India, they ruled for about close to 200 years. Okay, so we have then they intermarried and kinds of that. Okay, then their children, grandchildren. Okay, so we have got at least 2 members elected to the lower house of Indian Parliament in Lok Sabha. They are part of the Anglo-Indian community. Okay, so the Métis are kind of that counterpart in Canada. Okay, so they are the people of mixed Indian. When we say Indian, it means those Canadian Indians, those native Canadian Indians, and non-Indian ancestry. Then there were Inuits. They are known as Eskimos. They are the northern natives, and their number is very less, maybe 30,000-40,000 people altogether. And they live mostly in Arctic. Remember, I told you, I believe in the last class, I got a job over telephone. There was a telephonic interviews. I applied for a job in Alaska. I did not know where Alaska is. I've never been there. And this was a place called Nome. Maybe after the class is over, you can go to the Google and you can check where is the city of Nome. Nome, Nome, Alaska. This is one of the provinces, pretty close to Russia. And the 2 big cities, I believe one is Anchorage, the other city I forgot. Okay, they gave me a job. I was selected, and they say you will be given a helicopter. There will be 2 or 3 people. Okay, once a week you will have to go to these Eskimo villages, to Eskimo Indians. You have to teach that. But the reason I did not go there is because of the cold, because of the weather, and partly because it is 22 hours night and maybe 2 hours daytime. So for a variety of reasons, I declined that offer. I remember that. So this is Eskimo. They live in a place called igloo. You must have seen in the geography books, etc., etc. Okay. So the Aboriginal people, they also have self-governments. But apart from that, I think Canadian national government, they've also created certain specific provisions dedicated to the rights of the American Canadian Indians, particularly the Aboriginal tribes. Okay, as part of the different Act of 1867, as part of 1982. For example, in Section 35 of the Constitution Act of 82, it gives them legal protection of the Aboriginal existing rights. Okay, they can keep their lands, they can maintain their rituals, etc., etc. The Aboriginal rights in terms of language, religion, customs, the different titles, the different land claims, etc., etc. So I think basically the government of the day, particularly in the federal government, okay, they try to maintain that their own customs, their rituals, etc., etc. There is a special parliamentary committee of Indian self-government that was created in '83. Number of reports have come up, like Penner report, etc., which I'm sure you know that. When Brian Mulroney was prime minister in 1987, he also wanted to provide some more rights to the Aboriginal groups. Okay, so basically the point I'm trying to make is in the 80s, in mid 80s, in the 90s, and all along every few years, there has been a greater inflow of granting more and more rights. The whole idea is to give them some more rights. The Treaty of Nunavut was another important right that was given to these Aboriginal people. There has been number of articles, I think 41 articles. Some of them are giving them a designated areas in which they can stay, they can operate, they can maintain their schools, their language, their culture, their practices, etc., etc. They can harvest wildlife on those particular land. They can use the water the way they like. The federal government provides them certain amount of land uh, in return for getting oil and gas and mineral resources for those places. The transportation connectivity is also made by the federal government to make life much easier for those Aboriginal tribes. Okay, ports, commercial developments, parks, recreational facilities. So I think basically little by little, it's not like you see in a place like Montreal or Vancouver or Toronto. But the point I'm trying to make is the federal government is very acutely aware of what are the needs of the Aboriginal people, and they're very sensitive about those people and how best to take care of those people. Okay. In chapter 9, unit 9, we talk about civil societies, particularly how the civil societies they play very important roles in policy development and service deliveries, particularly in the last 40, 50 years. And when we talk about civil societies, the first important thing is you have to identify the problems. Okay. I mean, what are the problems? What are the different processes? How you try to frame a different policies. And once you know it, then you can go like step one, then step two, then step three. Then priority setting. What are the different priorities? A civil society may have 5 different things to do. But what is the first thing that you need to do before you go to the next step? So you go on a step-by-step approach. Policy formulation, you design that. Passage of the policy, how you do that? Is it necessary to go legislation? If that is so, then you go through the legislators, provincial and federal. Okay. Regulations, funding, because everything needs funding. How you get a funding? I mean, how much you can accumulate or collect by yourself, okay, among the civil society members? How much you can need from the federal government, from the state government, from other stakeholders? So I think those are also very, very important. And once you have it, how you passage that one in a proper, legitimate way in the federal and state government, in a federal government. Then service delivery, how you deliver those things, the delivering of service, okay, programs and funding, etc., etc. Okay. Then is it a good decision or a bad decision? How you do evaluation? Okay. So you need this. So this is the whole package. First, you identify the problem, then you set the priorities, then you formulate the policies, then you try to develop your passage through a constitutional means, then delivery of the process, then evaluation. So it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay, and maybe in some areas it can get slow, but the whole idea is you need to have the eye on the prize and what you are going to do and how you are going to do it. Okay. And if something is wrong, okay, does it need a minor surgery or a major surgery? Does it need a minor reforms or a major reform? So accordingly, I think you try to do that. But I think the key of any civil society is who are the key elements, who are the key actors. I think the key actors are citizen, citizen. So the point I'm trying to make is it is the citizen involvement in a very proactive way. Unless you involve the citizens, you cannot go too far. So you need to be very much with the citizens, for the citizens, and by the citizens. I'm just trying to use Abraham Lincoln's term of democracy. Okay. So the best approach is both citizen involvement and also at the same time to initiate the policy processes. It has to be sustained, it has to be legitimate, and it has to be effective. Okay. So it is not like a one-time basis. Okay. One-time wonder. Okay. It has to be sustainable. It has to be a continuous one. And it has to be legitimate. There has to be some amount of legitimacy. Because once legitimacy is gone, then I think it becomes very hollow. It doesn't carry any meanings or any effective any effect. Okay, and it has to be effective approach. Okay, so that's why it needs a very active, very proactive citizen involvement across the age, the race, the ethnic origin, the nationalities, the gender, and all of those things. Okay, no one single technology or techniques or institution is an idea. So it has to be more in a cumulative ways. Okay, it is much more in a more holistic ways. Okay, so no one single bullet can solve it. It has to be sustainable, and it has to be continuous, and it has to be a long-term approach. Okay, and it has to be a combination of both continuity and change. Okay, if something is working, you continue that. If something needs some changes, little bit here and there, either at the core or the periphery, you also need that. Okay, so I think that's all I have to say today in terms of the things, 3 chapters today. I think basically I tried to outline what are the basic. I think if you understand the basic aspect, the basic features, I think then it should be okay. You don't need all the nitty-gritty, all the details about every single things. But you need to remember at least the big picture, the big things, okay? Because once you know the big things, all the small, little, mini, mono things, they can also fit in those kind of things. But remember, Canada, just like any other democratic countries, they're trying to move up, okay? And the people. But they also have their strong opinions for and against. They're also trying to experiment with different things. And in most cases, they've been successful. In some cases, they have not been successful. Okay. So I think that's the way you should look at Canada, not something very extra special, but also not something down under. Okay. So they are doing, I would say they are doing reasonably well from their own perspective, learning from their mistakes, learning at the new cutting edge in all different areas, whether it is good governance, whether it is accountability, transparency. Like in India, we have Food Security Act, we have RTI, Right to Information Act, and many other things. Okay, so they are also trying to do that. In some areas, they need cooperation from other countries like US, okay, etc., etc. But I think they're doing pretty well. Okay, so it is not like they are just like another banana republic or things like that. Okay, so I think with that, I think let me conclude my today's lecture. Quickly, any quick question or comments? Anything?
Sir, thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes,
sir,
yes.
Sir, as you just told that a key factor for civil society is citizen.
Yeah.
What can be a key factor for a good NGO?
Good NGO. I think again the good NGO is first of all you need at least a band of people who are dedicated, who are committed, who are not seasonal bards. Okay, because I remember I was also part of the NGO when I began with. Number of people came, okay, but one by one people try to fit away, giving different excuses. You cannot run like that. Okay, you need a band of dedicated people, even if it is 10 or 20 or 30. Okay, first of all you have to prepare a particular ideas, objectives, manifestos, which are very proportionate, which are very doable, which are practical. You need some money, you need funding, but more important than money, the part is the motivation. The part is dedication. That is very important. Okay. So, for example, you ask 10 people, let us go to Nehru Park today. Let us go to Lodi Garden today. Let us clean up all the garbage of the plastics. Okay. Maybe 5 people show up, 5 people don't show up. Maybe today somebody came, tomorrow doesn't come. Okay. So, first of all, you have to believe in it. You have to put time. You have to put effort. You have to put energy. And you have to believe in it. Okay. And then I think the funding part will come along. Okay. I think we can funding is not the issue. I used to think that funding is the problem. Funding is the number 4 or 5 problem. The main thing is finding a group of people who are committed, who are dedicated.
Very true, sir.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir.
Sir, thank you. Okay, see you. Thank you next week. See you next week.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.